And welcome back to Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank. Another Catholic Roundtable edition tonight. As usual, joining me, we got Neil, who's in Mississippi tonight, Connor in Indiana, and Anthony over in Texas, and yours truly is over in Utah. And we got a few fascinating topics to discuss tonight. But first, we're very excited to announce that we're going back. We're going to reopen the Knights of Christendom on YouTube, a channel here. If you guys remember us, those that have been following me now for the past few years, myself, Anthony, and Neil, we started over there at the Knights of Christendom, and we've decided we're going to revive the Knights of Christendom. Connor is going to be joining us over there, and we're going to put the link here in the description box of this video. We're going to get that site up and running probably another week or so, right around there. And we'll be hosting those roundtable editions over on that side. I'll be cross-posting some of the stuff here on Frankly Speaking. If you're not subscribed over Knights of Christendom, I really encourage you guys. It's a beautiful site, and we've done a lot of good work there. And I think you're going to really enjoy it as we're going to continue to have these roundtable discussions right over there. So there we go, guys. Big announcement right there. Hey, let's get right to the topics. Hey, guys, fascinating. We had that story about a year ago where Candace Owens had the fallout over at the Daily Wire. She got, fired by Ben Shapiro over all this Israel stuff and Zionism stuff. It was a big story about a year ago. Candace went solo, and she's been a hit, man, on her own, man. Her channel is growing by leaps and bounds. She is absolutely crushing the ratings here, Anthony. And if you just simply do a cross post and kind of take a look at the numbers comparing Shapiro's site to Candace Owens' site, Candace is doing 4, 5, 6 times the numbers that Ben Shapiro is doing. It's quite amazing because, Anthony, to me, it's an indication that all this pro-Israel Zionism stuff, it's run its course in America. A new poll just came out. 53% of Americans have a negative view of Israel. This topic is changed, and I don't think the evangelicals are going to be able to rescue the Zionists at this point, Anthony.
No, I don't think so either. Make Catholicism great again. That's what we need to be saying right now. Make Catholicism great again, because what Candace has done is simply amazing. It's by the grace of God, and I kind of consider her in a way a modern kind of Joan of Arc, really. And I think there's some things. She's new to the faith, so she's obviously still learning, but I mean, just incredible, incredible. Praise God.
Yeah, Carter, she's very sharp. I got to tell you, she could hold her own. They've tried to throw her off because she's gone after a lot of the Zionism stuff over the past year. That's what really got her kicked out of Daily Wire. She will take you down. She's sharp. That debate she had with Rabbi Shmuley, who's a real piece of work, right? She took him down on Piers Morgan's show. I mean, she's really talented. I'm glad she's on our side, Connor.
Yeah, I am as well, Frank. Her converting to the faith was definitely a boost of morale. Um, and I think with her, what we're seeing is that people crave authenticity. And now that she's free from the restraints that the Daily Wire had on her, she can speak her mind more open now. And I think people really like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Listen, Neil, Connor brings up a great point. Authenticity. I think that's what people are craving. I think we're realizing there's big money behind big right-wing conservative Inc. We have lots of paid actors that are going on over there. And Candace represents the sort of that Catholic side that never really gets a voice. I've been criticizing a little bit Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles. I think they're good Catholics, but I just think Catholics need to be independent, especially, no offense, nothing, I'm not attacking Jews with this statement, but I think Catholics need to be on their own, Neil.
Yeah, I think especially when you talk about Candace Owens, what I like about her, what appeals to me, is she's unafraid to say what is offensive and controversial, and even to like politicians. Because I saw a video, some little clip where they try to censor her basically. They say, oh, order, you're insulting this other person, that kind of thing. And she just outright like did not back down. She goes, no, no, that's what's going to happen. You're not going to shut me up. So it's like this idea she's willing to just say what's difficult, even in the midst of these people who demand respect but don't have not earned any respect. And on top of that, what I really liked since her conversion was
Mm.
she puts a light on Catholic persecution that has been so very much ignored in favor of all the other victim groups, so called. I mean,
Yeah.
she will sit there and go back and, oh, you want to be the victim? Well, who's the victimized? Well, all these Catholics over here being killed and everything. Y'all don't want to talk about. And she will not stop. She'll keep talking over the person, like to not let her get shut down on these things. Like who was it? One person laughed when she was talking, and she really tore into him about you're going to mock this. These are Catholics being murdered, but you're going to mock that. But it's like she would not let up on that, and that's what I really like because how many times do we feel like you're screaming at the screen, at these
Yeah.
people, ready to punch the screen, and it's like someone say something. This is so stupid, and there she is saying it. You're like, oh, thank God, someone finally.
Yeah. Anthony, it's fascinating what Neil says there because, they say to Candace, but what about the 6 million Jews that died in the Nazi concentration camp? And her response is, yeah, but what about the 10 million Christians that died under Jewish Bolshevikism over at the Homodor? She shoots right back, Anthony.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, these are events that we had been discussing here amongst ourselves for a very long time. And it is incredible to see these topics actually hitting the mainstream. I mean, we started doing this at Knights of Christendom, what, like 5 or 6 years ago, and we were talking about all of these different things. And now you just see it's broken through into the mainstream, and I don't think there's any stopping it at this point. And Candace Owens is really, God knows what he's doing, right? She's the perfect vessel to carry this message because they have a very hard time attacking her, not just because she's very quick, but because of the very kind of, race narrative they've set up. It makes it very difficult for them to get her.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I love it. I love how it's coming back to get them.
Yeah. Connor, are we walking into a brick wall here as Catholics taking on a lot of these issues? I mean, I think it's frustrating because I think, like I said, the left-wing media is controlled by certain entities, the right-wing media is controlled by certain entities. And it just seems like I know we Catholics, we need our independence, but ever since Nostra Aetate, that Vatican II document that kind of threw our church for a loop a little bit, it seems like Catholics have backed down from, these issues dealing with Judaism. Is that something we just need to back off and just let it go? And I mean, obviously, Candace is not. But what do you think about Catholics about that issue?
Ooh, that's a good question. In regards to that, no, I think as Catholics, we're still called to evangelize and stand for the truth, even if it's not popular, even if it's dangerous. Oftentimes, I think we still need to obey our Lord's words and the teaching of the church, and just keep on with the mission.
Yeah. Yep. I think you're right. Neil, what's interesting before Nostra Aetate, before Vatican II, well, the Catholic Church had a little bit harsher position on the Jews, and historically, this is a very sensitive topic. And we're living a politically correct time, Neil. Is this something we have to tiptoe around, or do we go back to something like before Vatican II that upset a lot of people?
Personally, I think we should go back to what it was. Um, but I mean, well, here's the thing, though. How it's addressed may have changed, but the theological, doctrinal perception about Judaism has never changed.
Right.
There's only one way to God the Father, and that's through Jesus Christ. To say otherwise is to contradict Scripture itself, and that would make you a heretic. Um, so it's not as if the church just said one day said, well, all paths lead to heaven now. It's like no, that hasn't changed. What's gotten a little watered down is how they address the Jews, how they speak for them, towards them, and unfortunately, how they pray for them, which is almost non-existent, almost.
Yeah.
I mean, because in the Mass, it used to be they prayed specifically for the conversion of the Jews, because the conversion of the Jews is a part of prophecy. I mean, it's said they're going to come home one day, and the Catholic Church is home. That the Catholic Church is Judaism really fulfilled and
Yeah.
continued on. What we know today as Judaism is actually heretics claiming to be Jewish. It kind of, so it's like, but I mean, it can be confusing to look at it that way. So, but the point is that though one day they will convert and come back.
Yeah.
But if we're not going to pray for that, if we're not going to offer up their mass and in our homilies and that kind of, how can we ever expect that to happen? Excuse me. Well, within any amount of time,
Yeah,
God's will be done regardless. But we're kind of like beating against it in a sense. We're slowing it down.
we need to bring back the pre-55 Good Friday prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really out of charity. It's really out of love for as Catholics, and we deal with anybody. It's not just Jews, it's Protestants, it's Muslims, it's everybody. The love of Christ, the Gospels, the evangelization, because again, this is the truth that God revealed to us, and He called us to evangelize the world.
I think
Anthony, I guess my question for you is, Ben Shapiro's fallen from grace, and I think it's got to be somewhat humiliating for him to see Candace Owens doing 4 or 5 times the numbers that Candace is doing. But at the same time, there's been these rumors that Daily Wire is going out of business. Shapiro came out a few days ago and said, no, 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 I run the books here. We're fine. We're fine. We're fine. I do believe that there'll be somebody behind the scenes that will come in there and bail Ben Shapiro out, because that's just how they work. They take care of each other on that side. But I think his reputation going all in on this sort of, Israel first. Many people call him MIGA, right? Not MAGA, but MIGA, make Israel great again. I mean, Shapiro's all in. He's lost a lot of his audience. He's lost a lot of respect. Does he ever come back from this, Anthony?
Yeah, just real quick about Nostra Aetate. First, I think that E. Michael Jones makes a good point. I've read over that several times and I've looked at it quite a bit. And E. Michael Jones talks about how anti-Semitism has not really been defined by the church. I was looking for secondary documents issued by the Vatican that might explain some of the wording there in that document, and there is none. The only thing that exists is a document that was issued by some kind of a joint effort between some Catholics and some Jews, and I could not find the funding for the organization. So, I just find it suspect, and I'd love some clarity from the church on us other documents as well. But in that regard, in terms of Shapiro, can he recover? No, this is over for them. We're past this. It's so over. Candace's numbers just show that, and it doesn't matter now. Like even if Candace were to go away tomorrow, there's a number of people in social media that are going to come right up behind her. Everybody's talking about this. Everybody's looking back at history. We've gone from something that we used to speak about that was largely unknown 5 and 6 years ago to something now that when I get on X or other places where you have some free speech, it's all over the place. They're not getting this genie back in the bottle, however you want to phrase it, whatever term you want to use. It's not happening.
Yeah. Connor, any thoughts?
I agree with Anthony. I also am on X, and it's everywhere, Frank.
Yeah,
I
I know.
mean, can't get away from it now.
Yeah.
Can we change the thing from to Mika, like make Israel Catholic again?
Sounds like that sounds like a slur, Frank.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it was Pope Pius X that said, basically, we Catholics can't endorse, ultimately what Israel became and how it was founded in 1948 after the war. What the British did was completely illegal. I get it. What do we do now? It has been established, and we're dealing with just what the world has thrown at us. So it's a very interesting discussion, but I just think in general, Americans are tired. We've been to war all over the world over the past several decades. We've been lied to a lot. Really, the Iraq War turned out to be a bunch of crap at the end of the day. The whole thing with a certain pandemic, it came back to bite everybody in the ass. And Americans have just learned. They had to learn the hard way, but they've
Yeah.
learned. I just don't
Yeah.
think Americans want to sacrifice the blood of their children. They don't want to sacrifice money. I think it's over. I think the internet has changed the narrative. And with that, very interesting, with this narrative changing, we had a very desperate moment yesterday or 2 days ago on Joe Rogan's show. And listen, I'm not the biggest Rogan fan, but it was an interesting debate with this gentleman, Douglas Murray, who wrote a book on neoconism, right? Defending the neocon ideology. He's a British guy. And he was on there with Dave Smith. Dave Smith is a comedian who has been very critical of Israel. I've seen him on shows like on Candace Owens shows, and he's Jewish himself. He's been a big critic of the whole Israel offensive in Gaza. And it was fascinating, Anthony, because Douglas Murray came on and it was almost like it felt like he was trotted out by the powers that be to go in there and really save the narrative, this ever changing narrative that you were just talking about, how they lost control of the message. And Mr. Murray, in his defense of the neocons, whether it's the Israel war, whether it's the Ukraine war, or the thing that really hit me is the World War II narrative, which he doesn't like, how what he calls the revisionist history is bringing up lots of questions where we're questioning what actually happened in World War II. But what was interesting, Mr. Douglas, in his attempt to really uphold the sort of the establishment position, he came off as arrogant. He came off as smug. He came off very elitist comments well, all across X. Said, man, he was just a pompous ass because he went in there not to debate the issues, but to attack the messenger using debating tactics and using ad hominem attacks in order to discredit the other side. I thought it was an absolute disgrace, Anthony, and I thought it was actually embarrassing for Mr. Douglas.
Yeah, I think there's a desperate scramble to try and save the narrative. Look, I started questioning this stuff when my brother went off to the war in Iraq, and I started to investigate. I considered joining after 9/11, but something at the time was telling me like something wasn't sitting right with me, like something didn't seem right. And I started to investigate how economics works. And that was when I first began to learn about the Federal Reserve System, and I began to learn about how Saddam Hussein was switching over from the dollar to the euro in order to trade oil. And that was kind of part of the beginning of my journey through all of this. And so, from yellow cake to, COVID to every excuse they've used to get us into any kind of war the last 30 years, everybody's onto it. This neoconservative crap doesn't work anymore. They can bring out whoever they want. It doesn't matter if they have a fancy British accent or if they seem to be intellectually capable. And what's funny about this is the tactics they use are so old and stale. Like everybody sees through it now. If this was the 90s, oh sure, people would have been falling all over this guy. Like, that doesn't fly anymore because people realize you're not putting up evidence. Everything he said in his other interview with Ben Shapiro, too, he doesn't back up with any evidence. He's just making statements.
Yeah, Connor, last cast I did, what's it called? What did we win? Is the name of the cast that I just did on this channel here, and then questioning the sort of the ideas of World War II and what the West actually won. And in the midst of that cast, listen, I just question everything at this point in history. And Mr. Douglas here, I don't know if you saw the interview, Connor, but Mr. Douglas here questions really the narrative, upholding your general liberal narrative. You are so lucky. You're younger than all of us here, right? Especially myself. When I was your age and going to college and high school and all that stuff, we had a very small choice on how we could study history. We were forced to go to a library. This is before the internet, right? Or at least when the internet was in its infancy stage. We got to go to the library and we got to pick out a select amount of books on any historical event or any historical figure. And all those books were usually handpicked by the librarians, most of them which were far left of communist center. Right? These are far leftist librarians. Okay. And these are the books they chose. And that's how we learned history when I was young. But Connor, you grew up in the age of the internet. There is no restrictions here, right? I was never taught about historians like David Irving, who have been arguing for 50 years that, wait a minute, the World War II narrative, it's been distorted, Connor. I mean, for you, I think it's a little different. You're younger, but you've had the pleasure of the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, Frank, because I kind of, in a sense, got to experience both worlds. I remember as a young child, my parents would take me to the library. So I got that experience, but as I was coming to age, the internet, became more and more frequent, and so did information. Alex Jones was getting really popular in a lot of these alternative sites and influencers. So I was exposed to a lot of these things in my early teenage years, and I learned that a lot of the things they were teaching us wasn't true or was questionable. And a lot of people, it's even more at this point. People have even more access. There's even more alternative sources now coming to light. So people have that, and that, as Anthony pointed out, they're scrambling. They're getting desperate. They only feel the need to come on to these shows and these podcasts and put on this pretentious act because they feel that there's a threat, a challenge to their power and that of the narrative. But I don't think it's going to last much longer. I think too many people have become aware of what's going on and seen how these so-called elites and professionals have lied to the American people for at least the last few generations.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Neil, your thoughts?
I think at times when it comes to studying any topic, there's a danger with the internet giving us a false sense of expertise. Um, because we think that we could have this approach of, well, it's unbiased because I searched Google. And it's like, hold on.
That's a good point.
Google's directing you to exactly where they want you to go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's as if you walk into a building full of books and they said you're free to find all the information you want by any person, unbiased. Yes. Oh, good. Well, can I find books on history? Well, yeah, but only right here.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like you're kind of restricted in a sense because the algorithm is guiding you.
Yeah.
True.
That's why you got.
But I mean, you do have some liberty in that you have the freedom to ignore that and keep looking deeper and deeper. But it's just we got to be aware of that's what's going on in order to find the correct information.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I've been questioning a lot of everything I've been taught throughout my life at this point. I mean, I'm listening to like what was it, Father Maudley, who's talking about the Holocaust and everything. I'm like,
Love Father
wait,
Malcolm.
you mean to tell me I've been fed misinformation this entire like all of society has said this, and you're saying, hold on, this might not be exactly accurate. I'm like, my whole worldview, history, economics, nations, has been thrown for a loop the last 10, 15 years. Um, so I'm not surprised about anything that gets said on anything anymore. And in fact, every time I do hear something, I'm going, I don't think so, sir. I'm not going to fall for that again. You can tell me the grass is green, the sky is blue, and I'm like, hold on, let me check that.
Yeah.
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 one of the best places to search is Yandex outside of Google. And then also people, I ran a whole space on this on X about primary and secondary sources. The space literally went like a couple hours because there were some people that showed up to ask questions. But this is why Michael Jones is always talking about the importance of reading books. And honestly, like the view that Frank and I have developed of World War II, it is through the eyes of Italy and through primary and secondary sources. And that really opened up a lot of information to us so we understand what was happening a lot better at that time. Frank especially, he's got like encyclopedic knowledge of this stuff. But um, what what strikes me is that I know that some of the information out there with all this Hitler stuff that's going around right now is disinformation. They're trying to turn Hitler into some kind of saint, and he wasn't at all. Um, Even Mussolini was afraid of him. So there's narratives out there that are incorrect, and they're being propagated by, documentaries with crap sources, and, just you've really got to watch this stuff and pay
Well,
attention.
what I would say, the Hitler stuff is nuanced. And because, as I said before, what Hitler did in Poland and Italy is clearly documented and it was vicious. Now, they would say you're in the midst of a war and you've had an ally turn on you like the Italians did. And so you got to use brutal measures in order to tamp down the population. And so that's the kind of excuse they would use. As far as that one historical event that we're not allowed to talk about, we'll set that aside because that's the problem. It's very politically divisive. And so, like I said before, the Hitler thing, I'm not one to uphold him as a saint, but I am open to historical nuance because just a lot of these historical events have been abused, right, by certain key players, by again the elites that kind of control the narrative. And here's one of them. Okay, here's one of them, right? Going back again to Douglas Murray. And this is a comment that I've now heard from several Zionists, right? In their attempt to try and wrestle back the narrative in defense of this Israel thing going on over there. I've heard Prager say this, and now I've heard this Douglas Murray. Now, let me remind you guys, Douglas Murray was signed, okay, and wrote a book, and he's a part of the Manhattan Institute. The Manhattan Institute is right of center organization whose goal has been to convince people on the right that we should support Israel and demonize Hamas. So in many ways, it looks like to me, and I could be wrong, that Mr. Douglas, well, he's got a very special interest in defending this narrative. But Anthony, what Prager, I've heard him say recently, or at least in a past interview, I know Mr. Prager got hurt and he's been in the hospital. Prayers for him. No disrespect to Prager. I believe, we all should pray for everybody here. But Prager came out a few months back. I think I shared the video with you, Anthony. He said, whenever anti-Semitism rises, it is a sign of a collapsing civilization. And then this other video today that I saw, Douglas Murray, he came out, repeated that same line, and then he added that the Jews are really the source of the West, that the Jews built Western civilization, and then he compounded that with that same other verse saying, once you see anti-Semitism rising, that is the collapse. The Jews built the West, and without the Jews, his argument was, the West will collapse.
Yeah, again, he didn't cite any evidence for how the Jews built Western civilization, and it's a very broad statement. Before I comment on it, I'd like to hear Connor's thoughts on it in terms of the positive, like who were the societies that built the West, Connor?
Man, you got the laser gun on me. No, in my opinion, the West was built by one, the Catholic Church and her faithful, and secondly, by Greek philosophy, a combination in Roman law.
Yeah.
Those three things is what built and made the West great. I don't see see where this this guy is coming from at all.
Well,
Exactly.
um, Glenn Beck kind of subscribes to this. I've heard like a version of this. I've heard him kind of hint at it anyway. And I believe the answer he would give you is, well, which shaped the West was the like the Ten Commandments, Abraham and Moses, and their kind of teaching and laws and that kind of thing. And that is so heavily influenced people that that's what created the West, basically. That how to treat your neighbor, and and not to covet your wife and your property and this kind of stuff. By the way, a real quick note: that whole "thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife and your neighbor's property" that's split up because of not the Jews but the Catholic Church. So before you try to cite that, we're the one who broke that up into two separate things, so that property and your wife is not the same thing. Uh, um, but I'm pretty sure that's how they would respond, like going back to like Abraham and Moses and what
Yeah.
came out of that, the influence of that. Completely
Yeah.
ignoring the fact is that was the Catholic Church who took that, who is that basically. Abraham,
Yes.
for all intents and purposes, is
Yes.
Catholic. All right,
Yeah,
And
Abraham, Noah, Moses, all of them are Catholic. So,
yes, see, that's the thing. They totally ignore that we are the new Israel. And they
mhm.
totally ignore the fact that everything that Connor pointed out, you know what they really mean when they say that they built the West? What they really mean is that they built usury. The
user.
Yeah.
The Protestants came in and they opened it up when King Henry couldn't keep it in his pants. And then right after that, he opened up usury, and that gave the Jews an enormous amount of power, along with the Protestants that were engaging in this. And you know what? They didn't build the West. They've been participating in the destruction of it the past 500 years.
Hmm.
Yeah, and for Frank, if I could add something real quick, I
Yeah.
think why we need to jettison this whole Judeo-Christian
Yeah.
because it's really disingenuous and dangerous. You have people then that apply things like Abraham and Moses and the Ten Commandments, and they put that in a Jewish context when really we are the inheritors of that. So it's just totally disingenuous. We need to get rid of that term.
Well,
Yeah.
if you want a term like Judeo-Christian, the idea being that the ideas of the old Judaism and Christianity kind of come together. There's already a word for that. It's called Catholic Church.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, the phrase Judeo-Christian values originated sometime after World War II, I believe in the 1950s, and I could be wrong on this, but I've heard it attributed to Irving Kristol, who was, yeah, that's why I heard it.
The neocon father.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so, this has been an attempt again by the Republican Party ultimately to try and build this big, giant conformist tent, in order to get again enough votes and a big enough
To get the
voting
to get
block
the
to.
Protestant vote is what they want.
What's that?
To get the Protestant vote, they had tied it to Judaism
Oh, see, there you
because they know
go,
the
right?
Protestants worship Judaism.
Yes, yes, because that's really where the massive support for dispensationalism and even the idea of Israel comes from is the Protestants and this heretical really distortion coming through sola scriptura, which started through really a problematic version of the Bible, the Schofield Bible, sometime in the 1800s. And you look at movies, you look at the evangelical movement, John Hagee, really massive supporters
Oh
this
God.
idea of Zionism, right, Neil?
I used to listen to Hagee all the time. My mom would put him on to listen to him preach. He would have diagrams, slideshows, like point like, and then like he would always look at the camera and slap his hand like, and that is the thing. It's like as if like, wow, it was this great enlightening moment that you're basically a Jew, but
Yeah,
you're a Protestant who worships Judaism. And it's like, and that's going to be the 1,000 years of peace, when the temple's rebuilt and the Jews are back home. And that's what it's like. Wait, what? Then what was the point of Jesus? What's the point of any of this then?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's like it's so irrationally mind blowing that it's like, look, if that's your God, then I'm an atheist. I mean, because it's like there's no way God is that incompetent.
yeah,
He's that confused. You might as well just call him Zeus at that point.
Yeah, yeah. Andy, do you worry that this opposition to Israel and a lot of the rhetoric that we see on X, places like that, that it could lead to true, real anti-Semitism, especially if Catholics fall into that trap? Is it possible?
Yes, I am concerned about it. Not, I mean, I don't even like to say anti-Semitism because anti-Semitism, the word, I mean, what do you mean? Do you mean like you hate Semites?
Yeah.
And okay, well, what Semites do you hate? Because, there's Semites that are Muslim, there's Semites that are Catholic, there's Semites that
Palestinians.
practice. Yeah, exactly, Neil. It's like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, so I think the problem is that Catholics need to be Catholic first, and that means that the ultimate goal is agape. So not just love for your family. Jesus says, what does that matter? Right? Like everybody does that. Pagans do that. You have to love your enemies. So you have to pray for your enemy. The only way you can that what I learned upon my reversion and gaining experience as a young man, especially in the workplace where I worked, um, when you have people coming after you, that's a perfect opportunity because it's an opportunity to engage in prayer instead of getting angry at them. And then eventually, what happens is you develop that prayer life for that person daily. You start to see that person as your brother or your sister, and you kind of think about it almost like the Matrix. Like this person is stuck in the Matrix and they need to be freed. Like they're actually the ones that are miserable.
Yeah.
And you look at what I mean, Rabbi Shmuley is a perfect example of this. How could you be happy? I mean, you're like, excuse me, I know this is crass. If you've got kids in the room, remove them or turn this off. But like the dude, you're selling dildos with your two daughters. Like, what are you doing? I mean, I mean, like, you cannot be happy. You can't tell me that that person is happy. Uh, so I think that there is a danger in that, Frank. I think it's something that you have to actively deal with. And that goes for everybody because as you begin to become more aware of this, what you don't want to do is become like the IDF. You don't want to become like the Bolsheviks. You don't want to become like the people that actually carried out these horrific crimes. And so I would just encourage young men to look at the Catholic Church because there is a balance. We can see the problems, we can identify the problems. There are ways to deal with the problems that don't resort to that kind of violence.
Well, and the Catholic Church is open to everybody,
Right.
everybody. It doesn't restrict anybody. And so that's the beauty of it. We're not a supremacist kind of an ideology. Anybody
No.
that wants to follow the faith, that has been baptized and professes Christ as our Lord and Savior, that's the beauty of the faith. And, for me, I'm in a difficult position because I see some of the problems and that we struggle Catholics with this sort of this idea, these historical nuances, and yet my wife is half Jewish as well too, and so it's difficult that in the sense that we got to be fair and balanced. At the end of the day, we're Catholics, we're charitable, we're looking to evangelize, to express the love of Christ to everybody, and really not hate anybody. Just as our Lord suffered on that cross, He did not take His vengeance out in any kind of way. He just He took the persecution for us. He died for our sins, for our love. In many ways, that's what we do, even for our enemies. We pray for them and we make sacrifices for them as well too, as God has commanded us. And so, with that, some good news here coming out of England. Not a lot of good news coming out of England these days. The country's a mess in so many ways, and don't get me started on the Anglo-Protestant nation. But, anyways, apparently there is a Catholic boom, a Catholic conversion boom happening in England. And for the first time since the rebellion, the betrayal of King Henry VIII, Catholics are about to outnumber Anglicans in that country. Connor, is that a miracle or is that a miracle, Connor?
It is a miracle, Frank. And I've studied the history of England, especially its Catholic history. And a lot of people don't know this, but for a long time, England was actually one of the most devout Catholic nations in all of Christendom. It was known as Mary's dowry. It was dedicated to Our Lady. Um, there were Marian shrines, there were relics of saints, there were all kinds of beautiful things. And, King Henry, he broke away, and it just has been a mess ever since. Um, there were a few times in history where it seemed like England would return, but it ultimately didn't happen. But we're seeing it in our life, and I do think it's a miracle. It's a beautiful thing, Frank.
Yeah, I wish I had the lyrics in front of me. It reminds me, one of my favorite hymns is the one to Our Lady of Lourdes, I believe. And the lyrics there actually mention England, and it's
Yeah,
actually a prayer to bring England back to the Catholic faith, guys. I've prayed that hymn so many times. It's actually my favorite hymn that we have. It's that hymn where I know I've seen it not only in Lourdes but also in Fatima, when you have those processions with all the candles at night. They're singing that beautiful hymn. And
yeah.
and Neil, it's a hymn that prays for England to come back to the faith.
I think I I hate to be the pessimist of the group.
Okay,
Oh,
that's your job, though,
um,
buddy.
I almost hate to ask this because it's gonna make me sound like I'm like raining on everyone's parade. Um, is there any stats on the quality of Catholic that is outnumbering everybody?
Uh, well,
Like, is
okay,
it like is there any stat on like what do they believe? They believe in the Eucharist and that kind of
okay.
stuff.
Wait a minute, though. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Yeah, I would question your pessimism there, and I'll tell you why. We're not in the age of soft Catholicism anymore. I forgot. I think it was
Yeah.
Father Hardin. I think he says we're in the age of heroic Catholicism, and I think we're seeing that with like Candace Owens and who's the other guy that just got charged with rape charges, who's I believe is probably being set up. But anyways, all these great conversions that are happening, these aren't weak Catholics; they're actually strong Catholics. I think we're seeing a revival of the Catholic faith, and my hunch is in a time where the church is in a state of crisis and there's so much confusion within the Catholic faith. I mean, this is like the worst possible time, the most unlikely time for people to convert to the Catholic faith. And yet they're still converting. What else can it be other than the grace of God, Neil?
Well, it's not the new people that I'm questioning. It's the statistic itself of, well, there's more Catholics than Protestants.
Okay.
But the statistics I've always been told is like those who go to mass every Sunday is like single digits. Those who believe in the Eucharist is single digits. So it's like, okay, so there's 20 billion Catholics. 1% believes in the Eucharist. So it's like the question is it really turning around, or is it just you're getting a small group that's converting, and then
I
but that's faithful, but like a lot of them are also mixing there of they're just basically Protestant or atheist.
years
Frank,
ago.
if I
Go,
could say, Frank,
go ahead, Connor.
I would just like to say, I think I have an optimistic view of this because I think you have a country like England that it's been historically now for a long time Protestant and then secular. I don't think there's not that cultural Catholic incentive. There's not that kind of societal, pressure of identifying as Catholic. And the statistics I believe are for the younger generations. So I think if you're a Generation Z or millennial in England and you're identifying as Catholic, I think it's safe to say I would err on the side that they do believe in the faith. I know a few people personally. I know it's anecdotal, but I know there's some traditional Latin masses that are
Yeah.
really big parts of England and Wales. And what
Yeah.
I think is I attribute it to the intercession of Our Lady and the blood of the martyrs that were killed by the Protestants. Maybe it's finally coming to fruition.
I agree with Connor. I mean, like I was looking at a map of that area like 10 years ago on the FSSP website, and I was just like, wow, England is absolutely covered with FSSPs, the fraternity of um help me out, Connor.
It's the priestly fraternity of St. Peter.
Thank you. Exactly. Yeah. So, and then they have a couple of other ones there too off the coast that were very interesting as well, that were much older. Um, but yeah, I think it's likely that people are starting to turn to those places. And I think they're growing.
Okay. I think it's a great sign. That's all. And I really like it. The fact that we've come all the way back in England, hopefully, if the story is true, I think it's a wonderful sign. Okay, guys. Connor, you wanted to touch on this very fascinating, heroic story by Father Paul Murphy. He was
Yeah.
stabbed 7 times by a 6-year-old convert to Islam. I don't know much about the story, but I know you got something to say on it.
Yeah, I just found it interesting. Very heroic. I like how he responded. From what I read, he quickly, maybe immediately forgave the kid that stabbed him, and he had a rosary with him, and his quote that I just love, he said he felt like he had excellent top cover.
Okay, there you go. All right. All right. Yeah, definitely. Story I'm going to follow up on, but that's a great story there. Okay, guys, those are our main topics for today. Now, we have some questions from some of our subscribers here. And this one here, these questions are from Jay Duff. And first question here, and I actually go to Neil on this one. It says here, okay, got one in your opinion. What is the most misunderstood teaching of the Catholic Church today, Neil?
Oh, that's not an easy one to answer. There's quite a few. It's hard to say which one's the most. I want to say probably it has to do with I want to say relationships like marriage and but even like sexual relationships and whatnot, because homosexuality comes up a lot. Um, but yeah, if I had to pick one, I'm going to say marriage because of this era of a lot of modernistic, feministic views on marriage and this confusion of the word equality. They don't really know what that word means, I think. They certainly don't know what the church teaches on that topic. And I think part of that is also the church's fault itself because it's kind of like made it confusing to a degree,
Okay.
maybe unintentionally. Um, like with the theology of the body and everything that's come in, there's some confusing, questionable parts of in that. Not the whole thing, but there's parts um, that may lead to a lot of confusion in some people.
Okay.
So, like I said, I had to pick one. I guess maybe marriage, but I mean, a good argument could be put in for other ones too. I mean, it's so much is
Yeah,
misunderstood.
there is. Connor, I'll ask you this one again, coming from Jay once again. How do you reconcile your political views with your views of the Catholic Church?
Well, that might be a difficult question if I was a neoconservative or a libertarian, but thankfully I'm not. So my entire political philosophy is influenced by the lens of the church. So I, I guess I'm a conservative traditionalist, Catholic integralist would probably be the best way to describe it. So there's no conflict at all. There's nothing to reconcile.
Okay. All right. Anthony, also from Jay here. And do you feel the Vatican should be more transparent about their finances? And do you feel they did enough to stand up to the Nazis during World War II?
Oh wow, yeah. Let's that's a couple of tough ones in a row. Let's drop the conjunction for a minute and just go with the first part of that. So the Vatican had to take a loan from the Rothschilds after the Napoleonic Wars, because Italy was basically in ruins, the Papal States were in ruins. Oddly enough, it was likely the Rothschilds that fomented all this stuff. Um, so, you know, they were transparent about that, and a lot of people hated it at the time. It really, the loan was like in the billions of dollars in today's terms. I think it was something like, if it was 600,000 euros back then or something like that. But um, the uh, the problem of transparency comes in later, uh, after the Lateran Accords, because this is when the Vatican Bank is set up. Now, they have no connection to the Rothschilds. They're not printing money. They're not printing fiat currency or anything like that. Um, but they're remaining secretive in a sense because I think because you're in a world where the Rothschilds exist, where the central banks exist. And so, can there be some things happening there over time that are not good? Yeah, but I think that's because of the infiltration into the church.
Can I chime in on this one?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I got one for you. Operation Gladio, where the CIA, the American CIA, the State Department colluded with the mob and ultimately the Vatican to help fight off communism that was starting to become a threat right after the war because Mussolini and fascism had been vanquished. What we know is that the mob was deeply involved in Italian politics through the Christian Democratic Party. And the Vatican had a choice, either side with Togliatti, the Stalinist communist who ran that party over there in Italy, or side with the more moderate Christian Democratic Party that was full of Catholics, but it was also full of Gramsciite Marxists and socialists and the mob. It was a giant collusion between the American State Department, the mob, the Vatican, in order to make sure that Italy did not fall to Stalin. And when you get in bed with these groups, there's going to be some shady dealings, and the church got caught in the middle of this. You combine that with the infiltration of the church, and yes, you had problems as a byproduct of World War II and the aftermath, Anthony, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, that's a great analysis. It goes to show exactly what was going on at the time.
Mhm.
And so, let your imagination run wild. Of course, there were a couple of scandals, people they thought that should have been more exposed at the time, but you know, the Vatican has never engaged, the Vatican Bank, as far as I'm aware, has never engaged in usury or anything like that. It's always kept its own laws on those things. And as far as fractional reserve banking goes, it really doesn't have a choice in that. I mean, it's using the euro right now, I believe, because what other choice does it have? We're existing in this world that has, there's been a revolution against the church.
Yep.
And so the church is doing the best it can to survive in this and to bring people back to proper order.
Yep. Neil, one more question here. Well, a couple more questions, but this one here for you, okay? Again, from Jay. People believe if the Vatican slash the Pope would have did more during the time of the Holocaust, could it have been potentially prevented?
No. Uh, the the uh, the Vatican is basically surrounded by at this time by its people willing to destroy them. Um, the only reason they didn't just invade the Vatican and take over was for optics, was to kind of pretend that well we're kind of not that bad because see we're allowing the Vatican to do its thing and whatnot and we're recognizing the authority of the Pope and we're going to show respect and this kind of thing. So it's kind of like a marketing thing. Um, so if he would have just came out and said, well, I'm just not going to play ball with this at all. I'm going to come out and condemn you and this kind of thing, then they would have no reason to not invade and take over. And then you would not have saved anyone. There'd be no underground to hide people or get them out the country. Um, and you would have lost really an ally behind enemy lines at that point
Yeah.
because they would have just basically burned the place down.
Yeah. Well, let me remind everybody how complicated things were for the Vatican during that period. And that is the bishops in Holland, the Netherlands, decided to speak up against the Nazis. And what was the response of the Nazis? They gathered 40,000 Jews and Catholics all off to the concentration camps. At
Yeah.
one point, the brutality of the Nazis over in Poland got back to Pope Pius XII. And Pope Pius XII was finally going to give that condemnation. He wrote the letter up. He gave it to one of his bishops, took it over to Poland to give to the top bishop of Poland. He gave him the letter that was going to announce a condemnation of the Nazis. And that Polish bishop, the top Polish bishop, we don't want that letter here. If this thing gets out and the Nazis see it, a lot of Polish people are going to die. He ripped it up and threw it away. See, this thing was very complex, guys. And because what you have to remember, while the Nazis were brutal in their own right, the communists were worse. And the question is, who do you side with if you're the church? With the Nazis, you could at least talk to them. You know why? Because many of them were Catholics, right? Pope Pius XII was actually the ambassador to Germany before he became the Pope. He knew a lot of these people. He felt he could talk to them. You couldn't talk to the Bolsheviks. They murdered tens of thousands of priests and nuns in the Soviet Union. They burnt down 24,000 churches over there. So as bad as the Germans might have been, and again, I'm open to nuance on that, the Soviets were worse. And for that moment, the enemy of your enemy, whatever the phrase is, these are the tough decisions the church had to make at the end of the day. And that's why this thing is very nuanced. So now, a couple more questions here, and then we'll end the podcast here. This one from Chad Ganistan. I hope I said that right. Connor, one of my mind is the fading support of Israel from the United States is making me feel very white-pilled. At the same time, the question after is, what comes after? Okay, I think we touched on this, but Connor, you have anything to say?
Yeah. Yeah, it has me white-pilled as well. I'm glad that people are finally waking up to this in this country, and that this Schofield Zionist heresy is losing ground. What comes next? That's the $1 million question right there. It could be a lot of different things. There's a lot of different factions, but what I would hope would come from it is a conversion and a revival of the Catholic faith in America. That would be my hope.
Okay. Last question tonight, Anthony. I'm gonna give this one to you. Also, the future of Europe. Will Europeans become tribal again to one ethnicity, being English, German, French, etc.? And also, will Europeans accept God back into their lives? Future of Christianity in Europe.
Well, we talked a little bit about England this evening, so it seems to be going on that track, to some degree. I think the real question relates back to the question that Connor got. And I think that is, it's great that people are being white pilled on this, but the problem that I see is of what's next is that you see it building here in the United States. First, they're going after college students, and they can deport some of these people. Um, I believe that they're not only going to begin to push back in the media like they've been doing, but at some point they're actually going to come after very popular podcasters, and they're going to do the same kind of thing they did with J6, and they're going to try and shut this down. Unfortunately for them, I think there's going to be a lot more blowback when they do that. I don't think that it's going to go very well for them. I think they're going to overplay their hand even more, and that could lead to some bad things happening everywhere in the world, including Europe. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, it's over for them.
Yeah, I have more faith in Europe than I do in America at this point, simply because they do have a history. They have ethnicity, they have true faith, true religion over there, they have ancestry, they have an analogy of the faith. It all works. In America, we kind of rejected that, as our founding was kind of a mashup between Freemasonry and warring Protestant sects. That's what I worry about in America, unfortunately. And so there you have it. Okay, guys, great cast here. Any final thoughts before we go, Anthony?
Uh, no, just pray for our enemies.
Okay.
That would be it. Pray for our enemies, definitely.
Connor.
My final thoughts are this, Frank. I want to encourage people to read good books, read read the books they don't want you to read. In fact, I think that us here, we should make a compilation of books for our viewers to read. Like some Michael Jones stuff, Father Coughlin, all various different ones. But I want to encourage people to read, study history, and pray the rosary every day, and just really learn and live your Catholic faith.
Neil, final words.
I would repeat that basically. Know your faith, and establish a disciplined prayer life, daily prayer life, because intellectual knowledge is great and all, but it's only going to get you so far. Without that prayer life, that's not going to save you, and you're certainly not going to spread the faith or anything. So I think that would be prominent. I think that should come first and foremost is the prayer life, and then with that, meditating on those books, those readings, that knowledge, along with your prayer.
Okay, very well said. And I will simply add that I concur here, and I'm encouraged at the growth of the faith, especially in these turbulent times. So much confusion in the world, in the culture, political system, and really all around us as we see the morality collapsing all around us, and to see so many Catholic converts, big names, little names, everyday people. I'm really encouraged by this, and I think this is going to be God's response at some point. And so, with that, I want to encourage our subscribers, our audience here, keep sending those questions. Love answering those. And to remind you again, we are all going back to the Knights of Christendom, where we're going to do these roundtable editions here. And I will put a link in the description box. It's a great channel. And I think you're going to love it over there, guys. And I want to thank once again Anthony from Texas, my good friend Connor from Indiana, Neil tonight, typically from Louisiana, but Neil's in a hotel in Mississippi, right, Neil? I
Yeah,
think.
I'm kind of living. I'm living it up tonight. I keep muting my earphones just so
Okay,
you
that's
don't hear
fine.
like background noise. So I gotta like unmute and wait a second before I say anything. But yeah, I'm
Okay.
having a party tonight. Let me tell you.
There you go, buddy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I want to thank you for joining us for this roundtable edition of Frankly Speaking. We will see you over at the Knights of Christendom in about another week or two. I want to thank again my fine friends here. Great conversation. Love it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Frank. Sign out, Frankly Speaking. Good night, everybody.